In Money Watch, federal unemployment benefits are expiring for millions of Americans. The Century Foundation estimates that at least 7.5 million Americans will lose those benefits as emergency programs expire. Many businesses nationwide still dealing with a shortage of workers. Labor Secretary Marty Walsh addressed this issue on CBS This Morning.
Well, we need to continue to help people get connected to jobs. Since President Biden has taken office, we've added 4.5 million jobs to our economy. We're working through the Department of Labor, through our American Job Centers, to connect people with jobs. And in those states that are still having a difficult time with the variant, if we see numbers go up, where schools aren't going to reopen, or if they're concerned about unemployment running out, myself and Secretary Yellen sent a letter to the states letting them know that they have the ability to use the American Rescue Plan money to extend the benefits if they'd like in each state.
So for more on this, I want to bring in Sarah Ewall-Wice. She's a CBS News reporter covering economic policy. Thank you so much for being here and making us smart on this, Sarah.
Thanks for having me.
You got it. So what's next now for these millions of people who've really just been relying on these benefits?
Yeah, there is a lot of fear and uncertainty out there with the people I am speaking with who are on these benefits. Keep in mind, we are not just talking about those $300 supplemental payments that had been going out that kind of helped make people be able to make ends meet, those additional benefits. We're talking about the programs that were created because of this pandemic. These are the programs that are helping those who were gig workers, the self-employed, the freelancers, and those who have been unemployed long-term because of the coronavirus. These are benefits that were created, and those are going to completely go away at this time. So there is a lot of fear and anxiety with people. Something to keep in mind is the Biden administration has said that states can extend these benefits using their American Rescue Plan funds. At this time, though, these are expiring this weekend, and not one state I have spoken to has said that they plan on extending them to date. So that is not something we've seen yet. Some states have left the door open to movement moving forward, but then at least there will be a lapse in these payments if they even do come back, depending on where things go. And this really has raised questions about the entire unemployment system as it currently stands. Are we in a place where it doesn't exist to match the current economic landscape that we're facing when these benefits in general do not cover so many workers in the United States of America? So it'll be something to watch moving forward at multiple levels as we see Congress come back this month from recess, as we see states examining what's going on a state-by-state basis. But right now, it really is a lot of people planning on buckling down and not spending and trying to figure out where they're going to next make their payments for rent, for utilities, for food, as we see these benefits drop off completely.
Yeah, it's like falling right off a cliff. It just stops right then. And so, Sarah, here's a question that I've been thinking about, other people have been thinking about. You know, with so many people that are unemployed, there's also businesses dealing with labor shortages. So why can't we do a match-up there?
Yeah, I think this has been one of the real frustrations of this pandemic, and also one of the biggest questions of this pandemic is why aren't we getting the workers to match the labor force? Why isn't the labor force needs match the workers? And it's really been a struggle. We know there's a record 10,000 open jobs out there. And I've spoken to so many people, and there are many reasons why there are challenges with meeting these needs. Folks have talked about how this pandemic has really just made them reevaluate everything that they had been doing in their career up until now. The fact that they don't want to be in public-facing jobs, as we don't know where this pandemic continues to go. A lot of workers have talked about, well, we see these jobs out there, but there's nothing that matches my skill set and my qualifications. And so I have been struggling to find employment in my field of expertise. So that is another thing we've seen out there. There are the fact that some people are just terrified to go out and work in this environment where there is the pandemic, health concerns, still a risk among folks I've spoken to, especially those with underlying conditions. And then childcare, still a challenge out there. We might see some of that dissipate a little bit more as we see kids returning to school. But then there's that big debate over the Delta variant, so that's a challenge. But a number of these states that actually had already ended these benefits early argued that by ending them it would entice more people to re-enter the workforce more quickly. And the data has shown that even with states, mostly Republican-led states over the summer, that ended those benefits already, that didn't mean more people getting jobs in those states over states that had kept these benefits up until now.
Gotcha. And I keep thinking about the people who have said, I really didn't love what I was doing before, and so they've had epiphanies and want to kind of change what they're doing, and the pandemic has made a lot of people think of that as well. So here's a question also, Sarah. So what do you do, really? What sort of resources are available for the people who are now losing these benefits because they're going away?
Yeah, I mean, that is the fear here. Some folks are going to be looking at getting jobs where they can, even if they're not in their area of expertise, even if they're not in their field, because they just don't have a choice. That means potentially taking pay cuts in some of these cases, being forced into jobs just to make ends meet altogether. There are a number of opportunities out there for folks who are looking for workforce training, workforce development. When I spoke to a number of these states who are ending these benefits, they really emphasize that that's where their focus and their funding is going to help make it so people match their careers with the jobs that are out there. And the labor, you heard the Secretary of Labor saying the same thing about workforce development. The Labor Department really focused on that. But we aren't just seeing these benefits end of late. We've seen a number of different supports disappear. I mean, for one thing, we've seen the eviction moratorium. That is no longer there for folks to protect them who are behind on rent. We've seen the stimulus checks for the past 18 months, but those obviously are not in the plans moving forward in terms of what Congress is providing. So there are different things that we're seeing disappear and much more quickly as we head into the fall. One thing that has survived and will through the end of the year at least, if Congress is able to renew it as well, are those child tax credit payments. A number of folks have actually told me that those have been a lifeline that they're using, and the next one is coming up on September 15th. They usually drop at the 15th of every month. So there are things out there that are helping people get by. There's still some programs related to the pandemic that are out there, but these weekly unemployment benefits will not be continuing moving forward as of now.
Got the eviction moratorium, you've got that stopping, you got the unemployment stopping. A lot of things out there, not a good outlook. But thank you so much, Sarah Ewall-Wice. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.